Welcome to Darkwood Brew, a community for people who seek companionship on the journey beyond religious certainty. We stir up interaction among people in their living rooms and around the world. Wherever you are, Darkwood Brew meets you there. Thanks for joining us tonight. We have a great show planned tonight. We have Professor Rolf Jacobson, who is joining Eric and myself this evening, and we get to find out how the narrative lectionary first began, how it got started.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah.
Rolf is one of the co-creators of the narrative lectionary, and he and I actually overlapped at Princeton Theological Seminary. I was just finishing up my doctorate. He was just joining the doctorate program there in Old Testament, and I got to know him. He struck me right away as being an incredibly intelligent person and also very insightful, and that's only borne itself out over the years.
And here we are working together, so that's great. Welcome, Rolf.
Thanks for having me.
What can you tell us about how the narrative lectionary all began? How did it get started?
Well, it got started, I think, as the movement of the Holy Spirit. What happened was we have our most popular class at Luther Seminary over the last couple of decades has been a class called Genesis to Revelation, taught by my New Testament colleague, Fred Kester. And he actually developed it for Sunday morning, September through May, in a congregation, and taught it 3 times in local congregations. And one story a week, moving from Genesis all the way through Revelation. And I said to a assembly of church leaders once, why wouldn't a congregation try to preach that? He did it in Bible study. I said, why wouldn't a leader try that once? To preach from September through May through the biblical story. And a recent graduate named Daniel Smith came up after my session and said, sounds great. I just talked 12 churches into doing it. What's next? He said. I don't know about you, but all of my ideas for change are about how other people should change, right?
Exactly.
And so I really meant, why wouldn't one person out there try it, not me? But so I went back and I talked to my New Testament colleague Fred Kester and now we are in our 5th year of the narrative lectionary, and it just keeps growing. And we're going to do it as long as there's preference of other folks that want to join.
I find it very exciting. I was so grateful when you all released the narrative lectionary, and as someone who had difficulty with the common lectionary over the years, especially its treatment of the Old Testament, as someone with the Old Testament background, I really find it refreshing to find that churches are invited to actually take a whole season to look at the great stories of our faith and to kind of explore them in kind of a roughly chronological order and pull out some of the really great themes of the story, and then to focus on then you get to Christmas, and of course then that's when the focus shifts to Jesus, and from Christmas until Advent you're looking at one of the Gospels. This coming year will be Matthew.
Through Lent. Yep.
Yeah, through Lent.
Easter.
And then in Lent you're pretty much though focusing, kind of zeroing in on especially like the parables and teachings of Jesus. And then Easter till Pentecost, we have the stories of the early church, and so it's really kind of rooting us in story again, becoming once again people of the story. And then I thought it was brilliant to take the summer off. I mean, to tell churches, hey, there's other things you may want to be doing
Right.
that's particular to your community.
A couple of things I'd throw in. One thing is that one of the things that we didn't expect to have happen is people have told us the individual Gospels actually make more sense now because you're getting the first half of each of the 4 Gospels is really about Epiphany. That is the public manifestation in Jesus Christ of God's the story, the public manifestation in the ministry of Jesus Christ of the Messiah, and then so that's the first half of each gospel, which happens at Epiphany, and then we switch to Lent, and you get the stuff leading up to the story of the Passion, and so you get those stories where the evangelists actually wanted us to hear them, leading up to the story of Passion, crucifixion, and resurrection.
And as opposed to the common lectionary, you focus on one particular gospel at a time, and so it's a 4-year cycle.
And one text every Sunday too,
Right.
which is
Very helpful,
yeah.
I think.
But then you'll get those stories that occur in the 4 Gospels right before Passion Week or during Passion Week. We get those stories actually in November right now in the Common Lectionary. So Jesus is saying things, that are instructing the story of that they're making, they're preparing for his death, but we read them in November. And so, that was one of the unexpected discoveries is people have said how much more powerful that is. Every week I get an email. I got one today. I got one last week. And last week a pastor said, somebody decided that they wanted to be baptized because they never knew that God had a story that for them to know. And they said once they found out that Christianity was about a story that they were part of, they wanted to be part of it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Really great.
It shifts that idea that Christianity is all about doctrine. It really is about story, and so we hear the story of the Bible to be people of faith, and in the biblical time too. So
we need to move on to our discussion for tonight's narrative, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. And tonight's narrative is dealing with Isaiah. We have a lot of text all around that. But before we get into that discussion, let's take a look at where our series has brought us thus far.
Walk blind into the future precisely because you trust the hand that you've seen in the past. It's a very different way than looking forward and wanting the answer.
Bringing my crown and my purple robe. The higher I get, the more I get low. But I've been the man here since 55 years ago.
Learn to be true to that which you've been called into. Learn to be true to who you are and whose you are. However you tell that story.
The decisions we make matter, and because they matter, it's really, really, really important that when we discover we've made a wrong decision, to acknowledge it, turn around, come back.
My legs follow you.
It takes a lot of self-confidence to hold on to humility and not to be childlike in faith, right? I mean, that's really what it is, to say, oh, there's something else, and I didn't know it.
We have come so far in this series already. There's been such great discussion. I'm loving this series.
Yeah.
But tonight's particular conversation is all about different parts of Isaiah, and we have a thorny theological question.
We do. That question tonight is, have you ever taken a leap of faith? Have you ever taken a leap of faith? And kind of the corollary of that's, how did that work out? So a lot of people talk about taking leaps of faith, and sometimes they find themselves in a new place and wonderful, and sometimes they kind of not so wonderful.
Kind of in a whole other place.
Yeah, so some of the things that may come out during this episode may have some bearing on whether you want to take a leap of faith or not, and by what, how you would discern whether it's appropriate or not.
Yeah, exactly. And to do that, we're going to break up our Pneuma Divina text. There are 4 separate texts that are suggested for tonight's discussion, and we're going to start with the first 2, dealing with the 36th chapter of Isaiah, and then a little bit later on we'll deal with the 37th chapter, and then go back to the very second chapter of Isaiah.
You may wonder why there's 4 texts. We're talking about one per Sunday. It's one story per Sunday. This is from one prophet, Isaiah.
One prophet, Isaiah, 4 different ways, right?
Yeah, there we go.
Let's hear our text.
From Isaiah chapter 36, verses 1 through 3 and 13 through 20. In the 14th year of King Hezekiah, King Sennacherib of Assyria came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and captured them. The king of Assyria sent the Rabshakeh from Lachish to King Hezekiah at Jerusalem with a great army. He stood by the conduit of the upper pool on the highway to the fuller's field, and there came out to him Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, who was in charge of the palace, and Shebna, the secretary, and Joah, son of Asaph, the recorder. Then the Rebshakeh stood and called out in a loud voice in the language of Judah, "Hear the words of a great king, the king of Assyria. Thus says the king, do not let Hezekiah deceive you, for he will not be able to deliver you. Do not let Hezekiah make you rely on the Lord by saying, the Lord will surely deliver us. This city will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. Do not listen to Hezekiah, for thus says the king of Assyria, make your peace with me and come out to me. Then every one of you will eat from your own vine and your own fig tree and drink water from your own cistern until I come and take you away to the land like your own land, a land of grain and wine, a land of bread and vineyards. Do not let Hezekiah mislead you by saying, the Lord will save us. Has any of the gods of the nations saved their land out of the hand of the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim? Are they delivered Samaria out of my hand? Who among all the gods of these countries have saved their countries out of my hand, that the Lord should save Jerusalem out of my hand?
Rolf, can you help us put this prophet Isaiah into some kind of historical context for us?
Yeah, of course, that's a dangerous thing to ask an Old Testament teacher.
That's why I went to you instead of Eric.
It started off with that phrase, in the 14th year of King Hezekiah. And King Hezekiah is the king in Jerusalem, which is the the nation of Judah. And so, first of all, that's who that guy is. Hezekiah is the king of Judah in Jerusalem. And we know, because of historical archaeological correspondence, we know that the 14th year of his reign was 701, because Sennacherib, who is this Assyrian king, this Assyrian emperor, comes up to attack. We have Sennacherib's own description of this event that really dovetails quite well with the biblical story. And so Sennacherib, it lives over in the Tigris and Euphrates, the Fertile Crescent Valley, way over in what's now Iraq and Iran. And he comes over with his entire army, and he says he destroys 46 of King Hezekiah's walled cities, and then you see that's what's said in the biblical reference too. And he besieges Jerusalem, and Jerusalem has strong walls, and it's built on bedrock, so it was really hard to conquer Jerusalem. And so what happens in this story then is Sennacherib's general, that says the Rabshakeh, really, we should just translate that, right? The general of his armies. The general of his armies comes up and he yells into Jerusalem, don't believe Hezekiah, all you residents of Jerusalem, if he says, the Lord will protect the city. And then he goes through this list, right? He says, the great king in Assyria, and that's a really important phrase, the great king. The great king would be the king of kings, meaning the emperor of a lot of kingdoms that each have their own king. And in Israel's theology, the Lord is the great king. And there are the local kings should bow to the Lord. That's what the first commandment is all about, to have no other gods. The Lord's the great king. But in Sennacherib's theology of himself, he's the great king. So what you get here is another episode of what happened in the Exodus, when Pharaoh, the great king of Egypt, and Yahweh, the Lord, contested to see who was the Lord of this people. And you're going to get that again here. So Sennacherib's general says, don't trust this because no other God has saved any of the long list. And he kind of names all the kingdom he's conquered. And that's sort of, that's where this first scene right there. Now we have the major commercial break in the middle of the half an hour round. And that's where it ends. And you're going, that general, he's right. Why should we trust the Lord?
Yeah. And boy, they could hear kind of a lot of historical overtones in that for our day too. I mean, how many voices out there do we have saying, this church thing, this religion thing, what? You really, you're going to put your faith in that? It's like, where are we? The text really the story invites us to ask, where do we place our faith and trust? And then if we identify it's in God, well, on what basis, on what authority, and how do we even know if there's a word from the Lord? I mean, we're going to get into this a little bit later, but how do you even know that God has spoken? Really? So a lot of people saying, really? God speaks? God has anything to say? Are you going to place any kind of trust in this? And if there isn't a word from the Lord in some way in this faith, if God isn't communicating to us, then what is the basis of faith? I mean, why not just chuck it all and just exist on pure reason and alone, or what passes for reason in our human society?
Well, shall we get to the second section, or do you have another comment yet?
Well, I mean, tie it back to the big question of story, which is why this story? Why not? I really like the Lord of the Rings story. Why shouldn't that kind of be my religion? And or Seinfeld. I mean, and
Lost.
all the stories that we like, but there's something different because this story is making a transcendent claim about the nature of reality.
Yeah.
Well, let's read our second Pneuma reading. That's coming from the 37th chapter and the second chapter. Tracy?
So we're going to go to chapter 37, then we're going to back up.
Yeah.
The same prophet, but chapter 2.
Into the house of the Lord. And he sent Eliakim, who was in charge of the palace, and Shebna the secretary, and the senior priests covered with sackcloth, to the prophet Isaiah, son of Amoz. They said to him, Thus says Hezekiah, this day is a day of distress, of rebuke, and of disgrace. Children have come to the birth, and there is no strength to bring them forth. It may be that the Lord your God heard the words of the Rabshakeh, whom his master, the king of Assyria, has sent to mock the living God, and will rebuke the words that the Lord your God has heard. Therefore, lift up your prayer for the remnant that is left. When the servants of King Hezekiah came to Isaiah, Isaiah said to them, Say to your master, Thus says the Lord, Do not be afraid because of the words that you have heard, with which the servants of the king of Assyria have reviled me. I myself will put a spirit in him, so that he shall hear a rumor and return to his own land. I will cause him to fall by the sword in his own hand. The word that Isaiah, son of Amoz, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. In days to come, the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and shall be raised above the hills. All the nations shall stream to it. Many peoples shall come and say, Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth instruction, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge between the nations, and shall arbitrate for many peoples. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more.
Hezekiah here seems to actively be listening to the prophets of his time, but there is a lot going on at one time. I mean, all this political activity is swarming around, all around him, and he's got his own advisors, and he's listening to the prophets, and he's got everything coming at him at one time. How does Hezekiah make a decision? How does he decide which direction he ought to go or who he ought to be listening to? Rolf, any ideas on that?
Yeah.
Are there principles for discernment here that we can learn from?
I'm a Lutheran, which is a swift word in this connotation. But so I'm going to say, first of all, a really Lutheran thing, which is one of the things that when we enter into spiritual discernment, we know we're going to get it wrong. That is, we'll never get it all perfectly right. And so there's actually a freedom in that God has the power in God's freedom to correct us as we go. And so, so discernment is really difficult, though. And I don't want to, that sounds like a cliche, right? But trusted voices, I would say the first thing about what the Bible says about discernment is that voices that have been proven trustworthy in the past have the they get sort of what we should be inclined to treat them as trustworthy in the present and in the future, knowing that nobody's right every time, but so that Isaiah here, what listeners might not know is that the prophet Isaiah's ministry ran from 742 BC past 701. He's been around for 41 years now. I mean, this is he's had one call, right? He's had one call. So he's in his 42nd year of ministry, and so he's been around, right? They've heard from him, and they've learned through many crises that have been around that he's a trustworthy spokesman for the Lord.
Yeah, so he actually started his call under Hezekiah's father, Ahaz, and had warned his father, don't make any alliance with Assyria. This will only go badly. And he didn't. His father didn't pay attention. And sure enough, we find years later, and he said, I'm going to write this down. I'm going to write this down. You're going to get it. You're going to look back on this and see how it's right. But then later, though, the Israelites will revolt against Assyria. But Isaiah has changed his tune. He said, no, actually, don't. Now that you've done the damage already, gotten yourself under the yoke of Assyria, don't revolt right now. I mean, so the word of the Lord is actually changing in real time in response to real conditions. And they don't pay attention. He goes, I'm going to write this down. You're going to look back on this and regret it, And so he's had this great history of actually speaking contrary to where the popular opinion was going, the popular logic, reason even. And speaking a contrary word and then being proven right.
Well, it does seem weird to hear a prophet say, sit and wait, rather, or to not do anything, don't revolt. That seems counterintuitive.
Well, and it changes again. He said, don't enter alliance, then now don't revolt, a couple times that, but now he's saying stand firm, don't let them take you, don't give in to them, So it's really changing in real time. And again, every time if they would have paid attention to that, this other way of knowing, as opposed to the kind of the very logical system, it shows that it would have been better.
Can I throw one thing in there?
Sure.
So Eric's talking about the first sort of international crisis that happened back in remember, time goes the opposite way, right? It's 734 or so. He had said, at that time, don't fear, but don't enter into alliance with Assyria.
Right.
Don't do it. And so they entered into an alliance with Assyria against his advice, and now comes along the son many years later, and he says again, don't revolt against Assyria, because one of the things they did was when Hezekiah revolted against Assyria, he entered into a new alliance, this time with Egypt. Mm-hmm. And so I think the consistent element there, though, is that both times the kings of Jerusalem were trusting in foreign military powers. Mm-hmm. First, trusting in Assyria to save them from a military attack, and then later trusting in Egypt to save them from Assyria's military attack. And so there is both a change and a consistency. Yeah. And the consistency is the Lord is trustworthy.
So how does that but how do you kind of connect that with our thorny theological question about taking leaps of faith? Does Hezekiah have lived experience in which to make his decisions on? Is he making leaps of faith here? What's happening?
Well, it is interesting that he hasn't paid attention to him in the past in some key areas. Probably has paid attention to him in other areas. He's got him around as an advisor, right? Mm. But it does raise the question, just because he's been right in the past on some things, do you put your whole, there's a lot at risk in the situation. You can just feel the tension if you really sit with this narrative. You've got thousands of people from the Assyrians outside your walls. They are ready to kill you at a moment's notice, should you be resisting. And yet if you don't resist, what's going to happen? You're going to be probably carted into exile. There's a lot into, you might preserve your life though, and you might preserve your people's lives. So there's a lot at stake here. If some religious figure, even a trustworthy one, says, well, I've got the word of the Lord and it's contrary to your reason, what are you going to do? Are you going to take that leap of faith based solely on the trust in that one person? Or is there more to the story that may not even be in the narrative? I really think, if you look at the classic spiritual traditions of the church and outside the church too, but they really, they all kind of tend to talk about leaps of faith at times. We're called to take that step into the unknown, but usually it's not just simply going from 0 to 60. Like I'm on the edge of the cliff and now jump. You're going to be led to the edge of that cliff by 1,000 smaller decisions that lead you up to the edge of the cliff, so that by the time you actually take that leap, it just feels more like one more small step. So you actually have this history, this trajectory, this sense of confirmation. So Rolf talks about how none of us get this discernment thing right all the time, even people like Isaiah. So we're all, maybe, in our best efforts, we're putting out 80% of our best. And there's 20% of us that just kind of like, oh, what is this? This is BS, and I'm not paying attention and all this. But maybe if we're in our best, we've got 80% sincerity, going, even looking for this word. And so we're going to make mistakes time and time again. But if you make enough little decisions, so you can actually correct for those bad ones over time. So you actually you get led, to the place where you actually do take that leap of faith.
And so you're looking at an overall arc of activity, not necessarily individual.
Yeah, my strong hunch, and this is not contained in the text, but Hezekiah himself had those senses, those intuitions, that this is the right way to go. This is, as you envision the realm of available possibilities, every time he locks in this one, which happened to be the one that Isaiah also locked into, something lights up within him. Something feels like some tension that lets go, some sense of peace, maybe even a quiet joy, even though he's making it intellectually a terrifying decision. Resist the Assyrians? Really? They've conquered every other god of every other nation. And they've conquered our nation, except for us. Really resist? But every time you keep looking at those possibilities, it keeps lighting up in that direction. At some point you say, okay, I'm going to take a leap. But it's only because I've tested this, I've pushed it, I've pulled it, I've thrown it out, it's come back, and every time it keeps giving me that green light.
That makes it a little bit easier to talk about leaps. Rolf?
Yeah. Do you want?
Any conversation?
I have taken leaps of faith.
Lutherans take leaps.
Well, actually, it's nice that you know that, right? That phrase, right, the leap of faith, comes from Soren Kierkegaard, a Danish Lutheran, whom, since nobody is listening to us anywhere in the world, I will admit I've never really read Kierkegaard. But I know that much, right? Here's the most important thing, though, is to you're leaping towards something. And the most important thing is to know the leap of faith of the Christian is to leap into God's trusting hands. And so it's not about me, the leaper, once I'm in the air, right? It's about where I'm leaping, into whom I'm leaping. And I found that, in my life, when I have leapt into Christ's hands and trusted Christ's leadership, that I found that the Holy Spirit is sending me somewhere and is at the same time already ahead of me. And so that then after a while, you do kind of learn, and I think you kind of learn when you're kidding yourself too, that you really want the decision to be yes about something, and so you're trying to tell yourself to leap, but you get this sick feeling that because you really know that's not where you're supposed to leap.
Yeah.
Well, this takes us directly into our most famous part of this scripture, right? Isaiah 2. And you had said in an earlier discussion with us that God's will for the people is in mission. So in order to listen and discern God's will for us, it's actually leading us into a pattern of living.
Yeah.
You want to elaborate on that a bit?
Well, I'd like to say a couple things about this text in particular.
Okay.
From chapter 2.
From chapter 2 of Isaiah, and to distinguish it, in chapters 36 through 39 of Isaiah, that section really comes from the book of 2 Kings, which is telling the history of what's going on in Isaiah's ministry. And then what you get in the other parts of the book of Isaiah are collections of his messages. So we've had the first three little texts we had today were about the stories other people told about him. Here we have his word. And we could have picked any number of words, and in other years of the narrative lectionary, we take other passages of those. What's so interesting about this text, the beating of, let me back up. Last week we had Micah, and this week we have Isaiah, and the only passage that those two guys have totally in common, almost word for word, is this text. It occurs in Micah 4 and Isaiah 2, and they both speak this word at the same moment, the same period. They overlap. And it's a vision of the future. On that day, on that mountain, God's going to do something. And it's a vision of what it's going to be like when God's future breaks into, God's preferred future for the world breaks into our world. And it's going to be like this. Torah and the word of God are going to go out from the mountain, and the nations are going to stream in towards the mountain to receive Torah, and there God is going to arbitrate between them in such a way that nation will not lift up sword against nation, and neither will they learn war anymore. Instead, they're going to pound their swords into plows and their spears into pruning hooks. And I think that my friend Matt Skinner, who teaches New Testament where I teach, he says, he's got this great phrase. He says, poetry takes over where theology can't go any further. And that's what's happening in this vision. He says it's going to be the highest mountain. Well, that doesn't mean highest literally, like it's going to be lifted up above Everest, but it means it's going to be the most prominent mountain in the world, and the nations will spiritually journey towards there, and out from that mountain will come God's word of peace. Well, as someone that lives on the far side of the mountain of Calvary, where Jesus died, and then the word, on a mountain in Jerusalem says, go up, make disciples, teach them to make peace, teach them what I've taught you, and we're going to get that this year in the narrative lectionary in the Matthew part. That's really what's happened, isn't it? That nations have streamed to hear the word of God, and that where that word takes root, peacemaking happens. And you got that vision, the vision of the tools of war being turned into tools of agriculture and fertility so that the world can be fed. I want to tell you a story that happened recently to me, and I can't be really specific, but a former soldier, a veteran, and of course yesterday was Veterans Day, said, I would love to take one of the rifles that I fired, and I would love to take it into a blacksmith shop and turn it into something that I could till the earth and bring forth fruit with. And just struck me as a powerful thing that he was reading this text with me, and he said that. And that when God breaks into our world and does God's business, that's the sort of thing that happens.
Yeah. Goes from destruction to creativity, warfare to peacemaking. Signs of the Spirit. Signs that you actually are following in a path that is God-led. Yeah, I wonder too about the Jesus piece of that. To me, it sets up that high mountain, high on the cross. But then also with the note of the curtain in the temple being torn out is this really symbol of the Holy Spirit. The Spirit of God is now on the loose instead of being locked in one place, in the temple, on the mount. It's now out in the world. And so no longer are we trying to stream to one place. We're trying to stream to one Spirit, and who sets us into mission.
And that we still are in a place where we need veterans and we need peacekeepers, right? And we know we need peacekeepers even as we try to be peacemakers.
Absolutely.
Well, we have a tradition here to go to our online community and ask if there are comments or questions that they'd like to ask you, Rolf. So if you hang on for just a second, we'll gather those comments. And while we're doing that, we'll take a look at our social media. So we'll be right back. On our Facebook page this week, we asked our thorny theological question, have you taken a leap of faith and how did that work out? And Anna Harrison Grissel answered us, and she says, I took a huge leap of faith just last week when I left a job that just wasn't a good fit. I knew from about the first week that I wasn't meant to work there, but it took me almost a year to muster the courage to leave. I had faith that when I took the leap, a net would appear, and it has. My only regret is not leaving sooner and not trusting my gut the first time it spoke to me about this leaving.
Sometimes that resistance, though, is helpful. It's kind of helping suss out what is really the way to go, and so it's nice to know that God. There are times when God's still waiting for us.
Well, a wise person told me once, and that would be you, said
Really?
that if it keeps, as something comes up and that you just hang on to it and you just hold it for a bit and see if it comes back. And if it keeps coming back, then you know that you should be sitting up and listening to what's happening.
Yeah.
So I think, even if it took her a year, she was listening.
Yeah. And I think the higher the risk, the more it needs to be challenged. Whatever you think you're going, it needs to be challenged. So it's not even, it can be, let go of it, see if it comes back, but it also can be like it's with you, try to get rid of it, see if it comes back, those kinds of things. It needs to be challenged, and so that struggle is perfectly appropriate.
Exactly.
But then again, there's other times where clearly the Spirit keeps sending us messages and we're just not listening. At that point, sometimes I think the Spirit just kind of says, okay, I'm going to back off now, and when you get serious about this whole thing, get back to me. But you just kind of feel this like this void, kind of arises. Like, I'm getting nothing now. I'm getting nothing. Why? It's like, oh, well, maybe I'd been getting a lot of the messages and I just hadn't, I've been ignoring them the whole time. So sometimes even the distance I think the Spirit makes is a productive thing. When we sense that void, it means stop, what have I been ignoring? You know, oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, now I go, and you start going that direction. Suddenly it gets connected again. It gets engaged again. It gets joyful and wonderful and peaceful again.
And I've found too in discerning that sometimes even if those little steps that you're taking, as you look backwards on them, you can see a pattern that you didn't see while you were walking.
Right.
So that's another way to kind of judge that whole discernment piece. So thanks, Anna, for being on our Facebook and answering our question for us. Randy Sanders is our chat administrator tonight. Randy, what's the comments online?
Oh, we're having quite a bit of good discussion online tonight, back and forth, and got a good question from Ian. He asks, how does trust address fear since there's still risk? Can't we stay afraid until trust pays off?
Rolf, what do you think? We always go to you first.
Yeah, say the last part again. Can't we stay afraid until trust pays off?
Right.
Yeah, we can. I mean, sometimes I think we think trust means certainty, as opposed, and then we're pretty good at saying no. Trust can include doubt, but trust can also include a high degree of anxiety, and a certain amount of fear, and that doesn't mean that trust isn't there. It's that in that case, I think it's trust is holding on to God's promised future, which is trying to break in, and it hasn't broken in yet fully.
Yeah. You know, actually, I've got a couple of quotes I was thinking about that really kind of hit that directly too. They sound similar, actually, but they're a little bit different. One is from Nelson Mandela, who says, "I learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear."
Wow.
The other one, though, is a little bit more forgiving of those. Maybe you're not so triumphant. And this is by Edward Christophe Philippe Girard Rinaldi, Prince of Genovia, from The Princess Bride, who says this. He says,
Princess Diaries.
Yeah, Princess Diaries, yeah. Courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the judgment that something is more important than fear. The brave may not live forever, but the cautious do not live at all. The brave may not live forever, but the cautious do not live at all.
So you can hold on to your fear until you trust.
That's right.
Answer to Ian.
Speaking of bravery, should we try our guest cookies?
I was going to say that. Yeah, that's a good one. Good segue.
Rolf, we've made your cookie recipe, which is
spiced molasses.
Yeah, molasses spiced cookies.
Oh, okay. Well,
you want to tell us where these came from?
Well, it was my favorite recipe from when I was a child, and still are my favorite cookie recipe. And especially coming up into the Advent season, is we would especially make them. And one of the things you do is they've got some sugar in them, but then you roll them in sugar right before you bake them. And my mom then during December, we would roll them in red and green sugar. And for breakfast, I can just have a bowl full of
molasses spice cookies.
They are wonderful.
They are. I like those. They're not overly sweet. But they've got that really good molasses flavor to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. We have this recipe up on the internet too.
So we're sharing it with the world.
Yeah. So check out our Facebook and Darkwood Brew page.
Yeah. Rolf, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your insights into this Old Testament narrative and with the whole narrative lectionary in general. We so appreciate the fact that you created this so that we could be in conversation.
Yeah, the Holy Spirit created it. I've just been along for the ride, and I hope you'll have me back someday.
Oh, we definitely will. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Rolf.
Good night.